What up, Raphalitos? Welcome back to my channel. We're in the botanical gardens today. Let me show you where I am at. This is the botanical gardens, and I'm actually under a tree, but let me step out from under the tree and show you where we are. That's looking north. Actually, that's looking east towards the back of the botanical gardens gate. And we're at the traffic circle. This is the traffic circle. It's like a halfway point into the gardens. And south, that's the mausoleum for the late Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham behind these trees. And that's the entrance. That's the entrance to the botanical gardens. And let me show you on this side. They're actually building some stuff here. They're actually putting out tables, picnic tables. Right, that's a picnic table that they built recently. And apparently they're building them around somebody cutting the grass here on a Sunday morning. So these guys are working every day. And over here, that's the mausoleum of 1969. This is the Botanical Gardens in 2024. I did a video about this, so I'm not gonna give you a detailed view of what's happening here, but they've been spending some money and some time here in the Botanical Gardens. This is the mausoleum, the tomb for the president, and this way is picnic area. So a lot of people come in here on Sunday morning or on Sunday in general to have a picnic, bring their kids along, and they're actually making the gardens more habitable. The problem is that we have a long rainy season this year. It's like a month longer than usual. This is the end of July and we still have rain. So the May-June rains have actually extended into July. We get rain every night now and sometimes during the day. And so the pools of water on the ground simply reflect the rain overnight. Of course, the ground is still torn up from construction that's ongoing. On the other side of this street road down the center of the Botanical Gardens is the zoological park, the zoo. And you can see there in the distance, that's the kissing bridge. There are two kissing bridges. Let me see if I can get you a better look at the kissing bridge. The grass is wet and swampy, so I'm not gonna attempt to go closer to it. Right, but over there, that's the kissing bridge. And recently, they actually rebuilt this anyway, that's what's happening here. What I wanted to do is in this live is to give you a look at that's the entrance to the Botanical Gardens. It's a bus of people coming in, probably for a picnic. And let's go back towards let's see. Towards the back of the gardens. So this is the towards the back entrance to the botanical gardens. All right, so what I want to do today is to give you, okay, that's me. I want to give you a little update on what's happening. Let me sit under this tree and see if we can give you my update. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the context of Guyana in 2024, because people have been asking me questions and making comments, and I keep track of the comments, and I always plan to sort of answer the questions in a video, but usually my videos are dedicated to some very specific topic that I have in mind to address, and I don't really always get time to address the questions, detailed questions. So I want to talk about corruption in Guyana. So people have been asking me, and people are confused about corruption and how it works and why there's so much of it, and why it's so political to talk about corruption, right? Every time we talk about corruption, people bring in their political party. But it's really not about political party. Corruption is a cultural thing in Guyana. Talk about safety on the roads. So if you're going to remigrate to Guyana, these are some of the things that you want to look out for. Safety, not just road traffic safety, but safety in terms of being robbed on the streets. We want to talk about doing business, in other words, investing in Guyana, buying property, and so on. So that's what I want to talk about this morning. Now, I want to do a regular live, like every Saturday morning or every Sunday morning, to keep up with the current issues, right? I don't really have a news channel. What I'm doing is giving you a regular view of how the society is changing, how the infrastructure is changing on this channel. In other words, this channel is dedicated to showing you how the infrastructure is changing. However, I also want to be able to give you feedback on the things you can't see, right? So I can show you the new hotels that are being built, eventually the new bridges that are being built, new housing developments that are being built, but there's some things that you can't see, like the corruption, right? So recently, I think I made a commentary about this in the previous video. The US government has issued economic sanctions on some prominent Guyanese citizens, right? Notably the Mohammeds. And this was based on the accusation of several years of smuggling, right? This is money laundering. And as soon as you talk about corruption, people start to take sides as if this is a political thing. It's not a political thing, it's a cultural thing. So let me start this with an anecdote, as I started a previous live or video that I've done in the past. So when I returned to Guyana, I went to work for the University of Guyana. University of Guyana, that is the personnel department, what they would call HR in the US, constructed or wrote a contract for me. In that contract, they made an offer and included all of the compensation, right? The compensation package. And part of the compensation package for me was because I was coming back from Canada. At the time I was living in Canada, and so I came back to Guyana at that point to teach at the University of Guyana. In the contract, it was stated that they would pay for my return airfare to Guyana, and they would pay, I think, every 3 years for a return trip to the US and or to Canada where I was living at the time, right? So that was in the contract. However, once I signed the contract and I applied for the reimbursement of my airfare, I was told immediately that I could not be granted they couldn't return my airfare because I was already in the country. In other words, they're finding some kind of loophole to avoid paying for the cost of my travel back to Guyana. Not because it is in the contract, but because that is the culture here. The culture is to find a way to avoid paying, right? Even though the contract stated clearly that they were going to reimburse my airfare from Canada. Once I applied for the airfare reimbursement, they said that they're not going to pay me because I was already in Guyana when I signed the contract. Well, I was not already in Guyana when I started the process, right? So once I signed the contract, they changed the rules. It was not stated in the contract that if I was in Guyana, I had already traveled, that would void the offer of reimbursing my airfare. They just made it up out of thin air. And so I kept arguing with them over a period of like 12 months that, look, this stuff is in the contract, and once it's in the contract, you need to reimburse it because that's what the contract says, right? So eventually what happened is I had to go to the office of the president. At the time, I think Roger Luncheon was the minister in the office of the president. So I had to tell Roger Luncheon, I had to tell the University of Guyana, look, I'm going to report this matter to the office of the president, to the government, because you were not honoring your contracts. And it's only after I did that that they wrote me a check for the airfare. That was in the contract. No, they never fulfilled any of the other obligations that were written in the contract because after a time I just got fed up with them and I didn't renew my contract. That's how I left the University of Guyana. I left because I was frustrated that they were wasting the students' money and they were basically robbing me by simply reinterpreting the contract every few months to make sure that they don't have to pay me. And I'm saying that this is the culture of Guyana. Recently in the news, it was revealed, I think Nigel Hughes, the lawyer, posted on Facebook that the Chief Justice in the High Court had to rebuke the Attorney General because the Attorney General did not want to pay for oil that was purchased on credit from Venezuela. So basically what happened in Venezuela and what caused the collapse of Venezuela is that the government of Venezuela nationalized the oil company. So they seized the assets of a company called ConocoPhillips, an American company. So they seized all their oil production equipment and drove them out of the country. But because ConocoPhillips owned that equipment and had a contract with the Venezuelan government that was violated, ConocoPhillips took this up with the World Court, right? International Court of Justice. And they won a judgment against Venezuela. So that means that any country that owes Venezuela money for oil, remember there was a time when Venezuela was doing very well and they were selling oil on good terms to the Caribbean and neighboring countries and so on. Remember back then Chavez went to the US and accused George Bush of being the devil. He said George Bush was the devil and George Bush tried to assassinate him, and that was the time we were talking about. And I remember there was a very, very cold winter in North America at the time, and Chavez went to the United Nations Assembly in New York and offered to pay for heating oil for retired Americans who were suffering through that winter and so on. So during that time, Venezuela was giving money, well not money, oil on credit. Venezuela was selling oil on credit to the Caribbean and to countries, neighboring countries that were, in hard times, couldn't pay. Now Guyana owed Venezuela about $26 million for the oil that it purchased, or $22 million for the oil that it purchased during that period of time. Now after Venezuela nationalized the oil company, seized the assets of ConocoPhillips, And ConocoPhillips won that judgment. That is the judgment against Venezuela at the International Court. ConocoPhillips was allowed to recoup the cost of its losses, the assets that Venezuela seized, by collecting from the debt that countries owed Venezuela. So countries like Jamaica, Barbados, and all the other Caribbean countries that had borrowed were paying back the loans that they had borrowed from Venezuelan government for oil to ConocoPhillips. So it came up in Guyana's turn to pay up for the oil that it had bought on credit from Venezuela. And the Attorney General decided that Guyana will not honor this contract and refused to pay. And the Guyana High Court Chief Justice ruled that it was against the law for Guyana, and Guyana is the only country that would do this, to renege on this contract, because all the other countries that had bought oil from Venezuela were paying back this money to ConocoPhillips. But the Guyana Attorney General was saying we don't have to pay ConocoPhillips. In fact, we don't have to pay anybody because we have a dispute with Venezuela, or basically he's saying that for the judge to order Guyana to pay, it is like he is against our national interest. He's not patriotic, right? So the judge rebuked the Attorney General by saying this is not a political debate, right? This is justice. The justice system does not accept political arguments. So you cannot argue that Guyana does not have to pay and rebuke the judge for disagreeing with you by saying that he is not patriotic. He's not a patriotic Guyanese, right? So I'm saying all of that to say that there's a culture in Guyana where people do not honor people violate contracts, right? So the violation of contracts, the inability to honor contract is part of the culture here. People feel that once you sign a contract, you must find every means to avoid the cost of what you sign in the contract. And I'm saying that is what happened to me at the University of Guyana, and one of the reasons why I left is because they refused to honor their contract with me. So I didn't sign another contract with them. University of Guyana works by giving you 3-year contracts, right? You don't have like in the US you could become a tenured professor. There is no tenured professor in Guyana, right? You get 3-year contracts that have to be renewed every 3 years, and you have to sign a contract. So I refused to sign a new contract with the University of Guyana because they refused to honor the contract that they had signed with me, right? The 2 previous contracts. So that's how I left to start my own university, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So the Attorney General was rebuked and told to pay up, right? It is against the law. It's not a political argument, right? The culture in Guyana is to avoid paying contracts, but the law says you have to pay Venezuela. So they now have to open an account in Switzerland. This is what is ordered by the courts in Guyana, and put all the money that we owe Venezuela into that account, and that money will be paid to ConocoPhillips, which is the company that Venezuela defrauded when it seized all their assets, right? Their oil assets. Which is why the US government sanctioned Venezuela, right? Sanctioned Maduro and his government. Which is why the Venezuelan government collapsed. Which is why we have, Venezuelan migrants living in Guyana, right? So on the one hand, it is true that Venezuela mismanaged their economy and caused the economy to collapse. On the other hand, it is action by the US to sanction Venezuela that caused the economy to collapse. So these two things combine. And the problem with Guyana and our culture of not honoring contracts is that we could find ourselves in the same situation as Venezuela. Because remember, this current government, the PPP government, became the government after an election cycle, that is in 2020, when they they made the political promise, right? They made a campaign promise that they're going to cancel the contract with ExxonMobil, right? So the PPP political party decided during the last campaign that they were going to campaign on the basis of offering to cancel the contract with ExxonMobil because they claimed that the coalition government had signed a bad contract. They had only gotten 2% royalty. All of this, of course, was lies, right? The contract in Guyana, as I've said in many previous videos, if you go check my videos, I have always said from back in 2020 when the contract first became available to the public, and I read the contract and explained the contract, that the contract gave Guyana 52% of the total profits, right? So it's 50% of the profit and 2% royalty. So I explained that, and I explained that when you break that down, it works out to be 14.25% of total revenue. So the PPP government was arguing at the time that it's a 2% contract and that they were going to cancel the contract once they took power. And of course, up to now, the contract has not been cancelled. But what I'm saying is that this is a culture, right? It's a political culture in Guyana. It's a national culture where people do not want to honor signed contracts. If you sign a contract, you are expected to honor all the terms of the contract. But in Guyana, people look for every means to violate the contract. And I'm saying that this is part of the culture. So if you want to do business in Guyana, right, for those people who are asking about, how business is done in Guyana, I'm saying that if you're going to do business in Guyana, one of the things you have to be prepared for is that people do not like to honor their contracts. All right, somebody's asking in the comments there, was that Trey Morris, who was the first government to start the contract? The problem is that oil exploration in Guyana started way back in the 1970s, right? People were talking about oil exploration. Remember, Borden was talking about oil in Guyana when I was a kid, but they were exploring for oil in Essequibo on the land, right? And then back in the 90s, when the government changed, the PPP government took over in 1992, ExxonMobil entered the picture, and Exxon gave them a contract to explore for oil in Guyana, all over Guyana. And by then, the geophysics of oil exploration had improved to the point where you could explore for oil under the sea. And that is back in the 2000s, early 2000s. ExxonMobil started exploring for oil in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, because the technology had improved to that point. It's a sensitive geophysical technology. In fact, I'm a physicist, right? So I learned geophysics as an undergraduate student. So I'm quite familiar with not the details, but I have a superficial understanding of oil exploration from a geophysics point of view. So the PPP government at the time, it was Mrs. Jagan, who is now the president in Guyana. Mrs. Jagan signed a contract to give ExxonMobil exploration rights. And then later on, in 2015, when the government was changed, during that period between 2015 and 2020, during the period of the coalition government, the current contract that is enforced was signed by the coalition government. And that contract said that Guyana would pay the exploration costs for the discovery of oil up to 2015, right? So basically in 2015, ExxonMobil said that they had incurred a cost of $460 million in exploration costs. That is the cost of the exploration up to that point. And Guyana signed a contract, as the coalition government signed a contract to reimburse Exxon $460 million for the exploration costs. In addition, the coalition government signed a contract to 50% of the profits and 1% of the royalty, right? The whole idea behind that was to give Guyana the majority stake in the oil industry. That is 51% versus 49%. So the PPP government, which was the PPP party, which was in the opposition at the time, made a huge stink about this, saying that Guyana is only getting 1%. Guyana is only getting 1%. So the coalition government went back to the table before signing the contract and renegotiated for 2% royalty instead of 1%. So now Guyana got 50% of the profits and 2% royalty. So that is a total of 52%, and ExxonMobil and its partners got 48%. So that is the current contract that is in force that Guyana signed. Remember that contract was signed by Raphael. And of course the PPP government made a big stink about how they stole 20 million, because in addition to the contract that they signed, they got a 20 million signing bonus, right? And on the basis of lies about the government stealing 20 million and signing only a 2% contract, the PPP government took power, in other words, campaigned and won the election based on the promise, the campaign promise, that they were going to cancel the contract with ExxonMobil because it was only a 2% contract. Remember, all of this time, you go back and check the videos, I had been explaining what the contract is about, right? I explained that the contract gave Guyana 52%, and the contract was actually a unique contract. It's a brilliant contract. It is still available for those of you who want to go and look at it online. You can go read the contract, right? The contract says that Guyana doesn't have to wait to receive any payment. From day one, Guyana would earn its profits, right? Which is kind of unusual. And there are a lot of people still arguing it's a bad contract because Guyana has to wait and pay back all of this billions of dollars that it owes to ExxonMobil before it can begin to reap its profits. This is false. This is not what the contract says. The contract says that from day one, Guyana was going to get 12.5% of the profits plus 2% of the royalty, right? And I explained to you how that 12.5% plus 2% actually works out to be 14.25% of the total revenue, right? You can go check the videos. I've explained that in the past. So the point is that Guyana has a problem with contracts. Guyanese, right, have a problem with contracts. And it's part of the culture. It's not a political thing. The people who do it, who try to violate contracts, are from both political parties. And the people who I, in my experience, have tried to rob me by violating contracts were the coalition government, because back in 2017 when I left the University of Guyana, it was a coalition government that was in power. And it wasn't a political thing, it was a Guyanese thing. It was a very bad practice of violating contracts. So the point I'm making is that if you want to do business in Guyana, contracts are a problem. Signing a contract in Guyana does not mean that the contract will be honored. You kind of have to be very careful, very cautious, and have ways of enforcing the contract, because the culture here is that you're allowed to violate contract. Actually, I had the same experience in Singapore. So this is how I knew that Singapore is a developing country, because when I arrived in Singapore, I signed a contract with the Singapore government. And the same thing with the airfare that the Guyana government, the US government, the Guyana, University of Guyana administration refused to reimburse my airfare. I had the same experience in Singapore, where they refused to reimburse my airfare because they reinterpreted the contract to absolve themselves of the costs, so that they could justify refusing to pay the costs. And so for me, that is a characteristic of third world countries. That is a characteristic of developing countries. They don't have the same reverence for contracts that, for example, the US has. Somebody's arguing that the US does the same thing. I don't know that the US does the same thing. The fact is, you can go to court in the US and enforce your contract, right? One of the things that makes the US stand out is that it has very strong property rights, right? So a contract in the US actually means something. In my experience, all the contracts that I signed while living and working in the US, those contracts were honored, right, to the letter of the law. They don't even ask questions, in fact, because if it's in the contract, you're probably going to win a judgment in the court, right? So in the US, what I found is whenever I sign a contract, whatever the terms of the contract is always enforced to the letter of the law. I've never had problems with contracts in the US. And that's the difference between the US and developing countries. So if you want to come and live and work in Guyana, contracts are one of the things you have to be conscious of. Now, these guys are doing some weeding using a lawnmower behind me, so that's the noise you're hearing. All right, so that's one of the things, right? The problem in Guyana is contracts. Now, when it comes to corruption, right, the Guyana government is now so deeply involved in corruption that it has lost credibility, right? So I've talked about the situation where the U.S. government has issued sanctions against the Mohammeds and one of the members of the was the permanent secretary in a ministry in Guyana. Now we're learning over time that more than this is becoming known. In other words, it's being revealed that the extent of corruption in the issuing of contracts, procurement of contracts, is a very, very corrupt process. So if you try to apply for one of the government contracts to build a road, for example, or to build some government facility, right? The government is using taxpayers' money to build the infrastructure that I'm showing you on this channel, right? Once you see all these roads that are being constructed, the bridges that are being constructed, the playgrounds that are being constructed, I showed you in Kitty and in All Boys Town. These are taxpayer money that is being given to contractors in Guyana, right? The pump station, right? The building of pump station facilities to deal with flooding. It's taxpayers' money that is being spent. And I've explained that in previous videos how corruption works. In the case of Guyanese critic and the Mohammeds, they basically overpriced the cost of building pump stations by doubling the cost. I showed you that the average cost of building a pump station in Guyana is $350 million, but these guys got $865 million to build a pump station, right? And that is the nature of corruption. Now, further to that, it is being revealed that people who are getting contracts to do these things, like build pump stations and build roads and bridges and so on, they are all related to the government. These are government ministers who are registering businesses on the side or having their friends and their families register businesses and then directing the contracts to their friends and family. And this is the nature of corruption. It's kind of quite common. And I'm saying that the current government is becoming so embroiled as to lose credibility, right? Not only are they the procurement of contracts completely corrupt right now. Nobody trusts anybody in Guyana who has a contract that they got it honestly, right? Because what has happened is that some ministers of the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, has several companies that now give themselves contracts on the order of billions of Guyana dollars to do the job. And of course, because it's all about getting the money, building the facilities takes a backseat, so you're getting substandard construction and so on. So recently it has been discovered not only are the ministers of the government and their friends and families involved in the contracts, giving themselves, the police system itself is corrupt, because it is revealed that the top brass in the police are now banking millions of US dollars, that is completely out of sync with what they have, what their annual salary is. So one person banked $16.5 million in the police credit union. This is one of the commissioners of the police. And this is the same guy who bought a property for $100 million in one location. He has another property for like $50 or $60 million. So what is happening is that even the law enforcement is becoming corrupt, right? They found $100 million shrink wrapped in the office of one of the police offices in the interior. So a lot of the interior locations of operation of the police is funded by cash transfer, right? They have to pay for things like food and housing for the officers who live and operate in the interior. They have to pay for the construction of buildings and so on, facilities. And it turns out that one guy had in his possession 100 million Guyana dollars in his office. And he says that was his money. It didn't belong to the police, right? So this is the kind of corruption that is happening in Guyana. It's the sort of thing that I don't cover in the videos that I make on a daily basis when I show you the properties that are being constructed, the hotels that are being constructed. I'm showing you the hotels that are being constructed because they make for good visual viewing, right? I can show you changes that are happening in Guyana when it's visual. I can show you that on YouTube, but I can't really show you the corruption because there is really not. Does not make for good video. That's why I'm going to meet with you on this channel on a weekly basis to have these lives, because then I can fill in the picture, the stuff that I can't show you, I can explain to you. And one of those problems is the nature of corruption in the society. Now, how you deal with it is challenging. For me, what I've decided to do is to disconnect myself from the economy, from Guyana, from the Guyana's institutions. I left the University of Guyana to start my own university, and that university is going to be independent of the government. We're not going to take any money from the government. We're going to build our own campus, and because it's a medical university, we're going to build our own teaching hospital and so on, right? This takes time, and I have the patience to do that over however long it takes, 5 years, 10 years. I have the patience to do it, right? You can go on my website. I have a website that I'm building right now that basically explains the university that I'm building. So how you deal with corruption depends on you, right? I'm building some smart homes. I am partial to high-rise condominiums, right? Let me see if I can step away a little bit from the noise in the background here. I am partial to building high-rise condominiums because I think they are much more healthy, and you can control the environment, internal environment, and they're cheaper than, say, building individual homes, right? So I prefer to build a condominium for, say, 50 or 60 or 100 residents that is a luxury condominium that has facilities like safety, security, security cameras, and facilities that monitor the indoor air quality and so on. So I have a website that explains the kind of condominiums that I'm building. But the real point behind building these condominiums and doing it that way is so that I can operate independently of politics, independent of the government, right? So my way of dealing with corruption in Guyana, because I've now been back for 10 and a half years, is that I've disconnected myself from the economy and from the government institutions, and I've decided to build parallel institutions, right? To build parallel facilities, a university system, a hospital system, a housing system, right? So that if you want to operate outside of the sphere of corruption and the influence of politics, you actually need a system of institutions that are separate from the corrupt institutions that exist, right? So you can go and check my website. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the companies that I'm building and give you an update. There are people who have told me that they want to work with me on some of these companies. I am building slowly and deliberately because I don't believe in bankruptcy. I don't believe that you can, go into debt to build a company and then simply declare bankruptcy. I think the way to build a company with integrity and honesty is to make sure that you don't waste money. And if that takes you a longer time to build a company, then so be it. Because I know at some point, the vision that I have in my head will be fulfilled, right? So that is my approach to building companies. You can go check the website and see the things that I'm doing, and eventually, get involved if you want to. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is the traffic situation in Guyana. So a lot of people have actually argued that, or basically said to me that the roads are unsafe in Guyana for various reasons. And I've actually said in the past that the reason why the roads are unsafe is because of the same system of corruption. It's not because people are confused. It's not because drivers are confused. It's because drivers have a culture of disobeying the laws, right? So, starting with the fact that a lot of people driving on the roads have never passed the driving test, have never taken the theory and the practical driving courses because they can bribe the police and get a driver's license. So if you drive in Guyana, one of the first things you realize is that nobody is really following the road rules and the traffic laws, because nobody knows the laws. Nobody follows the traffic laws anymore. And that's the reason why it's unsafe. The reason why you get all these fatal accidents is, one, because people don't follow the traffic laws. The second reason why you get unsafe driving in Guyana is because the roads are unsafe, right? The design of the roads are unsafe. The government has decided to put traffic circles in some places when they should have built overpasses, right? The whole reason why you build an overpass is you eliminate an intersection, which means that you eliminate the risk of somebody running a red light or traffic crossing paths, right? So the reason why you should build overpasses is to avoid the possibility of intersecting lanes. And there are times when the government should have built overpasses when they build traffic circles. And traffic circle requires people to obey the law. I've seen people driving in the wrong direction around the traffic circle in Guyana because that's the kind of lawlessness that happens here, right? So one of the reasons why I refused to driving, when I first came back to Guyana, I was actually interested in driving in Guyana until I saw how the road system operates and realized that I'm not putting myself at risk. Right? I'm not going to spend all of this money because in Guyana the cost of a vehicle is inflated by duty and taxes. Right? The government charges about 300% duty and taxes, and I have some videos explaining that. And what that means is that you're spending about 4 times the price of a car or an SUV in Guyana as you would pay in the US. So you might buy a Toyota or Lexus SUV for $80,000 US, but in Guyana it's going to cost you $375,000 US, the same vehicle. And I actually made a video about that. So because people don't follow the road rules and the traffic laws, and because the government has built road networks that are unsafe, you get a lot of accidents in Guyana. And that's why I don't drive in Guyana. Now I will eventually buy vehicles and hire drivers, for, let's say you have a university that operates, you need transportation for students and faculty and staff and so on. So I am eventually going to invest in transportation and transportation facility. And I have, for example, one of my companies is an airline, right? We're going to offer private jet service, and that's going to require ground transportation as well. You can go check that website out. So I understand that you can't avoid transportation in Guyana, traveling in Guyana, but me personally driving on the road, I wouldn't do it because it's unsafe for the reasons I've stated. All right, so it's what? We're 45 minutes into this. I'm going to take questions for the next 15 minutes. Let me see what you guys have been asking. See if I can answer some of those questions. Like I said, I'm in the botanical gardens. There are guys who are mowing the lawns across the street. It's Sunday morning, and so on. And this is where we are. We're at the traffic circle. So let me take some of your questions. So somebody is saying that, was it the joint? But you still have to deal with the corruption in order to get your own stuff done. Yes, the point is that you have to deal with some institutions, but you can minimize your contact with those institutions. Like I said, I basically eliminated my contact with the University of Guyana. I'm actually a professor of medicine, but I don't teach at the University of Guyana anymore because I don't want to deal with this what I consider to be a substandard university system based on my experience. So the way I get around that is by building a new university, building an entire university from scratch where I can eliminate the kind of substandard activity and corruption that exists. Somebody's saying, oh, this DeJoint again is saying, because every move you make seems like someone trying to get over on you for lack of knowing. This is true. This is actually true in Guyana. There are a lot of people who use crime to get by, right? There are people who are selling property that doesn't belong to them, right? They would see a vacant house or a vacant lot and then put it up for sale. This is a scam. It's not only in Guyana. People are doing this. I understand the same thing is happening on Airbnb. It's happening, people are squatting in houses in the US and Canada and so on. So people come and they see an empty property, an empty house, and then they put a for sale sign on it and try to get buyers to buy, right? It's the same sort of thing that's happening. This is scamming. I actually tried to understand what is behind the rise in scamming in the world. I used to make videos listing the kinds of scams that are happening in Guyana so that people who visit Guyana can keep track of the kinds of scams that take place here. It turns out my conclusion is that a lot of people are not very bright, and some people have discovered that you can make a fair amount of money by scamming people who are not very bright. Now, I can get into that in detail on another channel. I have a channel that's dedicated to medical issues. I can get into that on another channel. But what has happened is that all over the world, people are discovering that some people, a very large percentage of the human population, is gullible, and another percentage of the population, you can threaten them, right? Some people, you can control them with fear. It's what's happening in the US right now. That they have used lies. This is the Trump administration is using a whole slew of lies to scare people into voting for them. And that's because half of the population is susceptible to fear. I left the US because I basically had enough. I left because the best way to describe it is that I felt I had reached a ceiling, right? I think the US is a great place if you're young and you're trying to get started and you're trying to get opportunities. But after you've gotten to a certain point, I got my PhD in the US, I realized that for where I wanted to go, the US did not provide the best opportunities. In fact, when I moved to Singapore from the US, my salary doubled, right? I explained to somebody, when I was living in New York and working at a hospital, I was making $60,000 a year. When I went to Singapore, I made $120,000 a year immediately from day one, right? So it is not true that the US provides the best opportunities. It provides the best opportunities if you want to do 2 or 3 jobs. You want to run a laundromat, or you want to have a restaurant, you want to sell from a food truck or something. That's the kind of opportunity you can take advantage of. But let's say you have a PhD and you want to build a pharmaceutical company. It's easier to do that in another country than in the US, right? So that's how I left. So that's my feeling about the prevalence of corruption that is taking over the world. It's actually not just Guyana that people are taking advantage of you, it's all over the world. And the reason is because people believe that they can take advantage of half of the population that is not very sophisticated, that really can't detect a scam. All right, so somebody is mentioning Haiti. Jessica's mentioning Haiti. Yeah, Haiti is a special case. Haiti is a member of the CARICOM. Guyana is also a member of CARICOM, and Haiti has been a scapegoat. The problem that Haiti has was created by the French government and the US government. Both the French and the US have taken advantage of Haiti and have robbed the Haitian people of billions of dollars. France started by putting an onerous debt on Haiti that they only recently were able to pay back. Billions of dollars they had to pay France because of the end of slavery. And the US went into Haiti, invaded Haiti in the early 1900s, around 1919, I believe. They invaded Haiti and raided the treasury. Basically, the US government fetched out millions of pounds of gold, right? Millions of bars, millions of dollars in gold bars that they fetched out from the Haitian bank and took back to New York. Citibank is in fact responsible for that. That money is now sitting in banks. That is the gold that they removed from Haiti, sitting in banks in New York, in Citibank. And the US government refuses to return the Haitian gold, right? But they're making all of this show of helping Haiti, when in fact the problem is they have been robbing Haiti for the last century. The same is true in Africa, right? US companies have made about $11 billion in profits from activities in Africa, in the Congo, in Kenya, in Nigeria, and so on, where the US companies operate. They have made $11 billion a year in profit, but the US makes a big show of aid, providing aid to starving Africans. African people are not starving. Problem is, it is all a propaganda operation where you give a pittance, a few $1 million in aid, and you create this narrative that Africa is poor, while American companies are making billions, $11 billion in profit every year just from the minerals that they're extracting from African countries. So that is the reality, guys. That's the situation with corruption, and it's global and it's all over the world. It's capitalism. Actually, they describe it as capitalism, but capitalism is, in fact, dictated by the person who has capital. And that's the reality. If you're trying to understand the way the world is evolving right now, you're trying to understand how Russia is at war in Ukraine, how Israel is committing genocide in Palestine, at the bottom of it is this capitalist enterprise, right? We're now dealing with end-stage capitalism. And what capitalism says is that if you have money, you can dictate, you can exploit, right? And the money, in fact, is really not even real. It's basically printing paper. The US government actually prints money to cover all of these deals that it's making. It's not money that is earned, it's money that they simply create from thin air, right? So the US government is now, what, $36 trillion in debt. But it's not money that they earned or invested, it's money that they created from just printing money. So if you're trying to understand the world, you can't really do so unless you understand that this is capitalism. All that we're seeing, the exploitation, the genocide, the war, the bottom line is that this is capitalism, right? This is how capitalism has evolved. All right, guys, we're at 53 minutes at the end of this live. I'm in the botanical gardens. I'm just gonna give you little rounds, right? They've actually been working on developing, that is investing on beautifying the botanical gardens in the last. Somebody's asking, when will your university be up and running? I think by the end of this year we should have our accreditation. So the thing about universities is that you have to have accreditation. You can't. It's not like a high school or private school. Your company has to be registered, and then it has to go through a period of being assessed for accreditation by the National Accreditation Council in Guyana, and that takes time. So I would say in a new academic year, the university will be ready to go. But for now, we're actually working on things like curriculum and outreach, reaching people and so on. So eventually it's about accreditation. So I'm actually walking towards the back gate. That is the back entrance of the botanical gardens. You can see me better without my hat on. So I'm walking towards the back entrance to the botanical gardens. And I'm showing you, this is what the botanical gardens looks like on a Sunday. On a Sunday morning. People tend to come into the gardens. Let me show you behind me. So there are lots of cars. They're coming into the botanical gardens to have picnics and so on. And the problem is that it's been raining for the entire month of July, and that means that the grass is growing rapidly, so they really can't keep up with cutting the grass. So there's a lot of weeds and tall grass around the gardens, and a lot of swamp now because a lot of the water is pooling. The water from the rain is pooling on land. But this is what's happening here in the botanical gardens. The back gate, that's the end in the distance. That's where they have the new hotel that's being built, that was built there, the Orchid Gardens. I actually show you some developments. The Orchid Gardens is now open, and they actually closed. They used to be able to walk through the gardens or drive through the gardens, but they've closed the back gate because people were coming in. This is thieves now, choke and rob. People would come in the garden, commit crimes, stick people up with knives and guns, steal their property and run out the back gate. And so for the past, 4 years since the pandemic, when they closed the back gate because of crime, they haven't reopened it, right? So, look, I really need to give you the truth. The truth is that living in Guyana means dealing with crime, dealing with street crime, dealing with people robbing you on the street. Now, I've actually shown in previous videos where I actually had my phone snatched a few times. I've actually lost several devices, electronic devices, because of street crime. So that's the reality, and the Botanical Gardens is dealing with safety by closing the entrance at the back so that people can't really escape quickly. In other words, commit crime in the gardens and escape quickly. But this is where we are, right? We're in the Botanical Gardens, and I'm walking on the back road. So at 58 minutes, I'm going to close this in a couple of minutes. What I've said is I'm willing to have a weekly live, like every Saturday or Sunday morning, to bring you up to date on the stuff that I can't cover, I don't cover in the videos on a daily basis, because some of these issues can't be covered in pictures, right, and video. I usually put on this channel just video of the new buildings, the new hotels, the new roads and so on that are being constructed. But the issues like corruption, like safety, like road safety and all the road accidents, like the fact that the police is stealing money now, that stuff can't be covered in a daily vlog. So that's why I'm gonna have lives, so that you get a fairly rounded picture of operating, what it is like to live and operate in Guyana. And my goal eventually is to put some of the other topics, right? So I have a channel that deals with food, right? I have Raphael Nation food. I have a channel that deals with medicine, and a channel that deals with business and so on. I have a business channel, and I'm going to eventually put some of those videos, in other words, the topics on those videos on those other channels, so that eventually you get if you follow all of the channels, you get a rounded picture. And the reason why I'm doing that is because not everybody wants to see everything. The people who watch this channel usually watch this channel just to see the developments in Guyana, right? The construction of facilities, the new developments. But there are other people who want to see how business is done, how the banks work, how to get a loan, and so on. That's going to be on the business channel. There are other people who want to see food, how the food environment is changing, and that's going to be on the food channel, and so on. So that's what's up, guys. This is Sunday morning in Guyana. As I say, as usual, if you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe. Share this video with friends and family around the world. Oh, we're actually now at 10,000 subscribers. So we can begin to do some new things on this channel that involves, for example, sponsorships and so on. We could be traveling further afield now that we have a significant base. So we're going to grow this channel. encourage people to join, because the more people we have subscribed to the channel and the bigger it gets, the further we can go. We can begin to see, you know, some of the vision that I have unfold on this channel. Like the airline company that I'm building in Guyana needs its own airline company. Part of that is dependent on Guyana having its own oil facilities, that is a refinery to produce jet fuel and so on. So some of these visions that I have are very, very big, but depend on other things. And you can begin to see that as this channel grows and I begin to go further afield and establish those views and those visions. But that's what's up, guys. I'm gonna stop this video here. I just wanted to show you this part of the botanical gardens as I walk towards the back gate in the distance. Share this video with friends and family around the world. And let's meet up again next weekend for another live. Later! Let's flip this around and show you where we're going. We're actually going toward the back gate. That's the back gate at the end of the street, and next door, that's the hotel. That is the Orchard Gardens Hotel and shopping mall and so on. But that's what's happening in this neck of the woods. Later!